On this episode of CPR Ford Garage, we're checking on the health of the 5-liter and the 88 Thunderbird Project Turdbird. And I have some extra tools so we can peel off the rest of the inner fender aprons that are left. Let's get to it. Say hi, boys.
Hi.
The front is off, and we kind of switched gears a little bit here because there's some head scratching that needs to be done. So I have the car kind of set up like an engine test stand right now because I got to make a decision on what to do with this guy. There is a little crinkle in the strut tower, and I do have those parts, but I don't really want to section and splice that, so gonna have to do a little thinking on that. I'm ready to order some engine parts, so we're gonna make sure this engine is good. So I've got this all rigged up for test mode. I just got a battery sitting there. I clamped the coil and the starter relay and the small ground together, so all that stuff will work. I've just got a piece of pipe shoved in here to connect the upper and lower radiator hose, and I looped the tranny cooler lines. That needs to be kind of redone anyway because it wasn't fixed right. So I've got everything, I think, kind of draped out of the way. I went ahead and hooked up a vacuum gauge because that's going to be the first test that we give. So I'm going to do a compression test, and I'm also going to drain the oil and see what that looks like. So I got my 2 crash test dummies in here. Right, boys?
Yeah, he's the only dummy.
Totally not true. False news. So I'm going to have Bryce go ahead and give it a start. We'll let it warm up a little bit. "20 inches of vacuum at idle is a good sign, and we're going to let it warm up enough for the pistons and cylinders to get warm, and then we will shut it down and do a compression test." Okay, so we've got the battery hooked up and charger hooked up because it started to crank slow on that first one. I have all the spark plugs out. They look pretty okay. This side definitely looks better than the other side. Got my compression tester hooked up, and here's the other side. So we're going to give it a go. Okay, go ahead, Bryce. Gas to the floor? Okay, crank her over. Okay, stop. Okay, so there's 120 on number 5. Yep, shut it off. Swapped in new plugs, let it run for a little bit to burn any oil out that was in there because I'm questioning that result on number 7. So we are going to test it again now while it's warm. You got the throttle to the floor? Stop. And we're right on the money at 120. I questioned my coupler, which is why I want to test it again, and I'll show you what I had going on real quick. We'll do it one more just for good luck. Go ahead, one more, Bryce. There's test pilot Bryce. Stop. Okay. So it was a fluke. We're good. We got 120 all the way around, which is good because we have just placed an order for some speed parts for this little nugget right here. We're going to turn this ugly duckling into a swan, right, boys?
Yes, we are.
Right?
Yeah.
What I had going on, I had to put this little extension on, and I think the first time I ran compression on number 7, that this wasn't in there right. So I think it gave me a false low reading. Because the motor runs really smooth, and I had no reason to believe that one cylinder was weak. But the reason I had to run that is because the spark plugs in these E6 heads have a really long shank on them, and they're kind of funky. Nothing real alarming on the old plugs. Quite a few of them are black, which I think it's probably been burning some old bad fuel, which is why I think the guy that I bought it from had flushed it out and put some fresh fuel in. Okay, now I'm just warming it up a little bit to drain the oil, and we'll take a look at that. I wanted to show you while I got it in test mode here. A couple of things with the vacuum gauge. Gives you a good idea on the health of your engine, which I can't. Okay, let's try this. Okay, I'm just gonna grab the throttle here. Obviously, when you increase the engine speed, vacuum should go up. Now with a quick whip open of the throttle, obviously vacuum should go down. But you can snap open the throttle and then let it close. Vacuum should go low and then snap back real high. Another good sign that it's healthy. Another thing you can check real quick too is if you hold it about 2,000 RPM or so. Vacuum should stay steady when you do that. If the vacuum slowly is dropping off as you're holding it at RPM like that, that means you have a restriction in the exhaust, which most times would be one of the catalytic converters. Otherwise, it could be a crushed pipe or a bad muffler or something like that. Now that that's all tested, we're gonna drain the oil and have a look at that, because this is not gonna be running for a while as we finish on the front. I've got a spot weld cutter bit to finish cutting these spot welds so that I can get these pieces off, and so that we can get on to putting that on there. Okay, you can see I've got my drain pan reasonably clean. There's still a little bit of greasiness to it, but we're not worried about that. We're looking for metal shavings and copper and stuff like that. Down there, because I'm changing the oil. Well, I'm draining it anyway to have a little look-see. What do you think?
Why do we have a little up-see?
No, a little look-see to see what it looks like. Melvin. 7/8 plug. I really hope this doesn't splash me in the face. So the Fox Body oil pan sump has 2 plugs. This is the main one, so we're gonna drain it first. Boy, she comes out kind of tough. Not good when they want to kind of fight you the whole way. We definitely got some oil leaks, boys, going on down here. See, when they do that, then that really makes me feel like she's just gonna shoot out and just spray the bejesus out of me. Oh boy. Here we go. It's blacker than my soul, but other than that, looks all right. Oh boy. She was getting away from me a little bit there. So you just gotta want to look at it, maybe take a little sample. She looks pretty good. Smells just like old oil. Doesn't really smell like fuel or anything like that. So that's she's good. We'll go ahead and build this motor. She's she's good. And this is where the front one's at. And that's just because there's clearance there for the cross member and the rack, the steering rack. So they needed the extra capacity here, and this is the low spot where the oil drains to. So they changing oil on a Fox body, you're always pulling 2 plugs. All we're really looking for here is basically no sparklies, no sludge, no chunks of silicone. It's just black old oil that needs change. So it's a good sign, because we're getting some speed parts for this old girl. So we want to make sure that we're our wagon to a good horse here. That's kind of, that's a little weird looking. Ooh, oh, that's got a little bit of not good in there. Just looks like some moisture. Nothing like the milkshaked 460 that we had. Yeah. There's just a little bit of moisture out of it. I think there was just a little bit of moisture in there, nothing too serious. When you don't drive them and you don't get the oil up to temperature enough, it doesn't cook the moisture out of the oil that gets in there from like stop and go driving. So I don't see anything that concerns me. That's looking not too bad. So when your drain plug washers get to looking like that, they've probably had about 27 oil changes too many. So they just pull off of the drain plug. You just keep a stock of these on hand, and you just swoop a new one on there. That's probably the source of at least 2 of the leaks. Okay, I'll show you real quick just a couple other things to check as far as the health of your engine. Pop the oil cap off, and so that's fairly normal. Moisture right there collects on the bottom of the cap. It's like I said, from not driving it long enough to cook that all off, but you want to kind of look down and see if it looks real sludgy. That looks pretty good. Also, when you pull your intake tubing off, as I struggle to put this back on, when you pull your intake tubing off, you want to kind of look in it and look in the throttle body. This actually, I mean, for a car this old, looks pretty great. Just if there's any oil or, you know, chunks of piston or any kind of stuff like that, that looks pretty good. I think a lot of my oil leak is coming from the valve covers. And we're going to be yanking this motor out at some point after we put some miles on it in stock form to really test on it and evaluate it. So I think I'm going to try and give those a snug. They should be the reusable gaskets. So maybe I can snug them up and get them to quit seeping a little bit, and then we'll degrease the motor and see what we got. Another thing that's about, and you can see where this one's definitely leaking too. We'll try to snug those up and clean all the grease off. These are original spark plugs. And these are original spark plug wires, and the way you can tell is that right there, 1988, and they're numbered 1 through 8. So those gotta go as well, even though they snap back on there surprisingly well. So tune-up wise, the only other thing we can really check is the distributor cap. So these have the awesome original boot on there that keeps it from getting wet. So what you do is pull that rubber snap guy off, and this other one right here, and she just unfolds right off of there. We're gonna save that because we don't want to lose that piece of 80s nostalgia. Snap her off and take a little look. Yeah, that is really not terrible. Got a little burr hanging off of there, but check that for wear. And these guys usually get kind of corroded. They got that white crustiness on them, but not terrible. We might just clean that up a little bit and leave it for now. So that is about all I can check for now. Oil filter's right there. I'm going to leave it on until I have a new one to put on it. Okay, this is a spot weld cutter. Now you have to think about which side of the panel you're trying to save and which you don't need. So come around here, Bryce. Basically, this is a teeny tiny hole saw, and this is an alignment pin, so you want to center punch your spot welds and then bring it down here, Bryce, so you can see that guy. There's one I just drilled. So basically you center punch a spot weld, put this guy in there, push it in, and cut through just like a hole saw till you're through one panel. Now I can take a chisel in between there and it will separate those panels. So I just have to do that about 47 more times. So anyway, that's the quick and dirty of how it works. I'm going to get into a bunch of them. When you don't need to save, this top panel is what we're getting rid of. These spot welds are done from the top right here, which I don't think they were supposed to be. I can't remember, we'll have to look at the other one. But what I'm going to do is take a cutoff wheel, because it's a lot faster, and basically cut the spot welds so that I can chisel this piece off. Here we go. You can see how the metal is kind of pulled up away from the bottom layer. So we're going to bust out the air chisel and get after it, and I guess we'll find out if we missed any. Works pretty good as long as you got enough air pressure and you remember which part you're saving and which part you're not. Look at all of that. So this got fairly bent up in the process, but with all that off of there, it's pretty flimsy and we can bend it back. This here was old damage, so that'll have to be all straightened out and re-welded. But basically, other than some cleanup of the spot welds, we've got it mostly off of there. This is the part, like I said, you want to save because that has part of the VIN number on it, and it's really not bad. So we'll get the rest of these turds off of here, straighten it all out, fit it with the new panel, and then we will be in business. If you feel sad because you didn't get to see me drill a lot of spot welds with the spot weld cutter, don't worry. On that one, we will have to, because we need to save the top panel, so we can't just wad it up and peel it off like we did with these ones. That's the tear down on the front end. I do still have cleanup to do where spot welds were, and I have some grinding and rebending on those inner panels to get them to fit up. The next episode with the Thunderbird is likely going to be fitting the junkyard front clip that I have, the core support and fender aprons. I just have to make a commitment on where I'm going to splice the frame rail at and start fitting that up. So stay tuned. We know now that the fuel is decent enough. It's got new fresh spark plugs in it. It needs spark plug wires and a cap and rotor and a fuel filter. The fuel filter looks ancient. We know that it has good enough compression. Don't get too hung up on the numbers. I would like to see a little bit higher than 120, but you got to take into account this still has an old style starter on it. It doesn't crank very fast. So I feel like if it had a mini starter on it and was cranking over faster, they'd be up there a little higher. I actually had to hook the battery charger up to it when we were checking compression because it was really starting to crank pretty slow. So oil looks pretty good. So from everything I can tell, the motor looks like it's pretty healthy, which is good because I already ordered some parts for it. So even though you may think this is really an ugly duckling, we're gonna make it look a lot better. If you don't care for these Thunderbirds, I think they can be made to be pretty cool. Also, all the stuff I'm doing with the front end repair and the engine and any stuff like that can apply to any Fox body. So that's Mustangs, Capris, Cougars, T-Birds, LTDs, geez, there was a bunch of different ones. So all the same practices apply. Like replacing this front core support is the exact same procedure on a Fox body Mustang. Also, I'm looking to put together a pretty budget-minded engine package for this engine. Like I said, they make about 150 horsepower, pretty pathetic in stock form. The stock shift point is about 4,000 RPM at wide open, and I thought that was ridiculous until I did a little reading and discovered that with these E6 heads, that motor's pretty much done making power at 4,000 RPM. That's also why it's so weak. So we are going to look to double the horsepower on a good budget. So if it would apply to any small block Ford, the package I'm going to put together. So stay tuned. I hope you find it interesting. All you that are sharing and subscribing, I appreciate it. We are inching our way up to 800 subscribers, which is awesome. The next episode, I know you're probably looking for it. I'm looking to get back on it too. The next episode, we're going to be back on the 69 F100. And what we're going to be doing is shortening the frame for the short box bed. So if you're getting a little sick of the T-Bird stuff, just stay with me, and we're going to be back on the 69 F100. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it a ton, and stay tuned.